This is the Bringing Business to Retail podcast with today's guest, Mentalist Jonathon Pritchard.
Welcome to the Bringing Business to Retail podcast on SelenaKnight.com. Stay ahead of the competition by opening your doors to business experts so you can learn, grow, and be inspired. Passionate about bringing business strategies to independent retailers, please welcome your host, Selena Knight.
Hey there, and welcome to today's episode of the Bringing Business to Retail podcast. You are going to love this one. Have you ever wished that you could read somebody's mind? I know. It's one of those superpowers that I'm sure we wish we had, but if we did, maybe we wouldn't like everything that we discovered. Well, today's guest is exactly that. He's a mind reader, a mentalist, and his name is Jonathon Pritchard. And wait for it, on today's episode, Jonathon is going to take you behind the scenes of what it's like to be a mind reader. Plus, if you stick around, he may even share some tricks that you can put in place in your business and in your life. Now, I'm really excited to have Jonathon on the show. In fact, I have just started Jonathon's course called Like a Mind Reader. And I'm not going to tell you where I'm at just yet, but needless to say, it is very enlightening. And it is something that I can take away and put in place. I can put what he's taught me into practice in business and in life. Now, I will keep you in suspense no longer. Welcome to the stage, Jonathon Pritchard, mind reader and mentalist. Before we jump into today's episode, I just want to do a great big shout out to the patrons of the show. Now, this is something that we implemented in episode 100, which is where my daughter Alana, who's 8, interviewed me and got a little bit obsessed with our dog. It's very funny. If you need to pick me up, go and listen to an 8-year-old get interviewed. But this show stays proudly independent, just like your retail store, because of people like you who pledge their support to keep it going. Now, putting this show together is not easy and it costs a lot of money. You know this. This is how business works, right? So I'm out there putting anywhere between 5 and 8 pieces of business strategy advice in your pocket or in your earbuds every single month, and you can pledge your support to keep the show alive. So I would love it if you would become a patron of the show. Simply head on over to SelenaKnight.com/patron and you can find the information there. Click the big button on the show notes if you would like to pledge your support, and jump into today's episode. Hey there, and welcome to this week's episode of the Bringing Business to Retail podcast. I am always fascinated by the science behind how we humans behave. It is one of those hobbies that I love to take a little bit further. So when Monica told me that we have a mentalist appearing on the show today, I wasn't quite sure what to think. From my vast experience of watching The Mentalist on TV 10, 12, 15 years ago, I appreciate the concept behind mind reading is much more about watching for behavioural cues and clues. But like a magic trick, I still don't know how the heck they do it. So today, Jonathon Pritchard, magician, mentalist, and entertainer turned speaker, coach, and author, might just show us how we can read minds too. So welcome to the show, Jonathon.
Hey, I'm super glad to be here. That's a fantastic introduction. I hope to live up to it.
Now, you know the first question I'm going to ask you is, how the heck do you become a mind reader?
Absolutely. That's always the first question out the gate. And my short answer is I grew up weird. Like, that's honestly how it is. But basically, when I was 13, I learned how to juggle fire. When I was 15, I was hammering nails up my nose. When I was 18, I was eating fire. And in college, I met a guy by the name of James Randi, who had $1 million challenge to anybody who claims to be psychic or have any supernatural powers for real. And I started working with him, designing testing protocol for people who applied to the challenge. and I saw all the ways that people were trying to scam their way to the $1 million and thought, "Pff, I can do these scams better than they can." And that's how I became a mentalist and a mind reader.
Okay, I just have to stop back there. How do you
Yeah,
put nails up your nose?
very, very carefully. Uh,
Hey, where do you learn this?
Well, I grew up around kind of retired circus folk. My first mentor, Randall, used to be a street performer down in South Florida and retired to the mountains of North Carolina, where I grew up. And he ran a summer program that my mom enrolled me in. Little did any of us know how much that would affect the rest of my life. So I started the school program, or the afternoon program, knowing how to juggle. And then he goes, "Well, you already know how to juggle. Do you want to learn how to juggle pins?" Absolutely. This looks like fun. And once you can do that, it's not that much different to set them on fire. So my parents were thinking, well, he's learning from a professional. He's young. He'll heal quickly if he gets hurt. So, why not? So I gotta give a lot of props to my parents for, letting their wild child do a whole bunch of crazy stuff like that.
So I have to ask you though, is the concept behind this is a magic trick question, I'll be
Hmm.
honest.
Yeah.
Is the putting nails up your nose a sleight of hand trick, or do you actually stick the nails up your nose?
You actually stick the nail up your nose. There's a tradition called geek, and it was kind of the sideshow stuff that was real, and they were really doing it. There's no artifice to it, and it's just gumption and having the wherewithal and the knowledge to do it properly. So, eating fire, you're really doing it. Hammering a nail up your nose, you're really doing it. So, you're not hammering it up your nose so much as into your nose. So,
Ah,
if you've ever been intubated or the EMTs put the oxygen tubes down your sinuses into the back of your throat, that's the pathway that the nail takes. If you hammer it straight up your nose towards the base, to the front of your skull and your brain, you could break through the very thin part of your skull there and kill yourself. So if you don't know what you're doing, you can have a really bad day.
yeah, yeah. You can't see my face right now, but you can imagine what it looks like, can't
I,
you?
I've seen that face in every audience since I was 15 years old. I know exactly what that face is.
All right, okay. So moving right along to mind reading.
Hmm.
So you've had the professional training. Well, no. So you've had the professional observation, let's call it.
Yeah, yeah.
What was
Because
the
every show is a science experiment. It's a laboratory where I get to test out ideas in real time and get feedback. So that's why magicians and mentalists kind of have 1,000-year head start on scientists trying to understand the psychology stuff in a laboratory setting. Well, we do it every day in the real world, on stage, in a variety of contexts. So we've got an experiential background that is light years ahead of where the science is.
And I'm a science-based person. I'm the
Mhm.
logical person. And I have been to some of those magic shows, like the really big glitzy ones.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I
yeah.
appreciate that it's sleight of hand and mirrors. And so sometimes I'll spend the whole time trying to work out what's going on. And then when it happens and I haven't seen it, mind blown.
Exactly. But that's you just drilled straight into the heart of the matter. That's totally it. So there's this misunderstanding that, children like magic and it's for the kids. But if you've ever been to a kids party where there was a magician, the parents are blown away a lot more than the kids are. And why that is so here's the secret to every magic trick you've ever seen, will ever see. Here it is. The magician or mentalist creates a context for the audience to make logical assumptions that are later shown to not be true,
So is
right?
this a bit,
So,
sorry, is this a little bit like neuralistic programming? You kind of tell them where you're
yes.
going to end up?
Well, you show them. You build a context that allows them to assume where it's going, where that would be the most logical assumption to make, but it's not the real thing that's happening. Right?
Yeah.
So our brains are constantly trying to predict the world and kind of forecast what's going to happen so that you're not surprised. Because in the real world, a surprise is usually deadly, right? It's a car accident, it's falling down the stairs, it's a whole bunch of stuff, right? So when you don't have an accurate predictive model of what's real, you're the person that's going to hurt, not reality. But in the context of a magic show, it's a fun, wonderful experience because our expectations aren't fulfilled, right? That's the kind of fun part of it. But if you don't have enough life experience to understand logically what is supposed to happen, then you don't have any assumptions to violate and surprise. That's why kids aren't as entertained by magic as adults are, because kids live in a world of magic where my brother can eat an elephant, so what? Right? It's the parents who know that things don't just float for no reason. They know beyond a shadow of a fact that that is not possible, but there it is. They're seeing it, and seeing is believing. So it's those two experiences that they can't reconcile, and that's the magical effect.
And I still, to this day, don't know how they make things float.
Well, exactly.
That's the whole point,
Exactly.
though, isn't it?
Right, because if somebody says, you know what, you can't fool me, I'm onto you, what they're really telling me is I lack the intelligence to make accurate predictive models of reality and therefore cannot be surprised. Right? Like you've got to be, you've got to have a certain level and a level of sophistication for magic to even work in the first place. Like you can't really do magic for a horse, right? only for people that have logical capacity.
Yeah, and they understand, I guess, cause and effect or consequences. We have to get that. And that's the other thing about kids is they don't understand consequences. So they don't know what is supposed to happen, but we do.
Exactly. Exactly. So over our lives, we build these beliefs and mental models about how the world operates. And since it is useful for almost everything, always, every day, we think they're pretty good. But we never notice the times that it doesn't work out right. Right. So that's where optical illusions kind of give you a peek into that world. Or if you think somebody is your friend and they're not, oh, hey, Carl. Oh, that's not Carl. Sorry. Right. It's not that life ending. Right. So you don't really notice all the times that it goes wrong because you don't notice it going wrong, which is a really weird idea.
But it makes sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense. So in the context of magicians, they've seen it over and over and over and over again how people behave exactly the same way, regardless of the society that they grew up in. People respond to magic the same way, right? It doesn't matter because it's based off fundamental operating principles that govern how human beings interact with reality. And it's that kind of behavioral model that plays out in business, in web design, in email marketing. Anytime you're trying to get a behavior out of your audience or your market or whatever, you've got to think about the context that you're building, right? So if you're not getting the right behavior, you're not giving them the right context to reward that behavior in the first place.
Can you give us an example of how that might happen or how that might occur?
I'll give you the kind of science example and then a kind of real world example. So there's a behavioral psychologist, B.F. Skinner, whose work just makes me laugh all the time when I read up on it. He made superstitious pigeons, and to me that's hilarious. Not just pigeons that do stuff that looks weird. These pigeons genuinely are superstitious. So he had a whole bunch of cages, and there's a lever, and the birds would figure out if I hit the lever, then food will drop out.
Mm-hmm.
So the birds figured out really quickly, if I hit the lever, then food drops out. Okay, I get it. Well, unbeknownst to the birds, once they were classically conditioned that way, he would then set food up to drop out at random time intervals. The bird wouldn't have to hit the lever. So whatever the bird was doing, looking over its left shoulder, and then food drops out, it goes, oh, now I have to do that to get food out. And
Ah.
what's really weird is intermittent rewards are more motivating than rewards given every single time for the behavior. And we can look to gambling, right, to prove that right.
Mhm.
If if I gave you $1 and you gave me 94 cents every time, well, that wouldn't be as exciting. But if I gave you $1 and sometimes you took it, or sometimes you gave me $20, ooh, that's exciting, right? So those intermittent rewards reward behavior more effectively than consistent rewards. So the food would drop out and it goes, all right, now I got to look over my left shoulder. It looks over its left shoulder, looks over its left shoulder, looks over its left shoulder. And now because the timer goes off, food would drop out, but it just reinforces that behavior in the pigeon. So now the pigeon believes wholeheartedly that it looking over its shoulder is what makes the food drop out. But those two are not connected in any way. That's superstitious behavior, right?
Mhm.
So you have to understand the context that your shopper is in and then build an environment that rewards that behavior. So, for example, real world, your website. If you have a visitor and you want one behavior out of them, only offer that one option. I see so many websites that say, sign up for this, sign up for that, sign up for our email list, get our newsletter, right? There are so many options. There's no clear, distinctive behavior that the retailer is trying to get out of their visitor. So when the visitor has too many options, they just choose none of them.
Oh, that
Right?
is so
So,
true. How many times have we been
yeah.
to a restaurant and there's 5 pages, 10 pages in the menu, and you're like, I just can't think of this. There's too much here for me to make a decision.
Exactly. So you get choice paralysis, right? Too many options, you choose none of them. But if you constrain the number of options, say to 3 or 5 at the most, your click through or whatever behavior you want will increase exponentially. So think about the one thing you want your visitor to do and only offer that option. Now, the superstitious pigeon part of this is don't try to reinvent the wheel with a totally unknown context, right? Because if your visitor shows up at your website and it's some experimental design that you think is great but only makes sense to you, your visitor won't understand the box. They won't know what you want from them, and they're like, "Oh man, this is just way too confusing. I'm out." But if you make it very clear based on previous experience and traditions and kind of knowing what works, don't try to reinvent the wheel. Use what works, constrain the options, and your interaction rates will just go up like crazy.
So can we just use an example there? If people are thinking, tell me if I'm on the right track. Say you sell handbags. On the front page of your website, don't have a lovely lifestyle shot of somebody sitting at the beach because they don't necessarily have a handbag in the picture. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Well, that is kind of future pacing, right? So people kind of make their choices by emotion and then justify them with logic.
Mm-hmm.
So that lifestyle image is evoking that emotion of some mystical future of happiness that I'm not in currently because I work in a cubicle and I've not seen the beach in 12 years. Right. So that hero image kind of has a useful purpose in framing the value of the handbag as this is the kind of person who buys our bags. This is the kind of person you want to be. Therefore, you subconsciously make the association that I want to be that kind of a person. So I'm going to do that by buying this handbag.
Okay, so that wasn't a good example, but I was thinking of another example of
Yeah.
an ethical, because clearly I was wrong on that one. An ethical clothing company that I went to, just a small brand, and when I
Mm-hmm.
went to their website, it had a picture of like a purple alligator, like a comical, which was obviously
Mm-hmm.
their logo.
Right.
but it meant nothing to me. Like, I was sitting here going, am I in the right spot? Is this kids' toys or some kind of weird Silk Road site that I should know about?
Exactly.
And that's the point
Exactly.
where I only stayed because it was the website that a potential client had given me. I'm like, well, I must be in the right spot. I clicked through the website.
Right. See, communication isn't just what you say, it's what the person you're talking to hears. And if you're speaking in a visual language, in a verbal language, written language that your visitor doesn't speak, how can they understand you? So when companies start using imagery that isn't in alignment with their mission because some sales guru sold them on, well, you need a mascot, but the mascot is so far out there that there's no easy way to connect the company to the mascot. You kind of go, I, I don't know if I'm at the right spot. And
Mm-hmm.
that confusion is not what you want, right? So that's an example of where that wasn't executed properly. And the way I understand that from the mentalism world is a lot of people misconstrue amazement with confusion,
Oh,
right? That
yeah. I
they
see that
go,
one
I
a
was so
lot.
confused. I was so confused. I didn't even know what was going on. Well, that confusion means there's no magical effect. If you're confused about what happened, you can't be clear about the effect, right? So really good experiences, really good magic tricks, really good mind reading tricks have to be so simple and direct. I don't know this. I told it to you. Ta-da, there you go. But if it gets confusing, okay, I need you to write this down and then go bury it for 3 weeks and then dig it up on a full moon. And that, right? It's just like, what is this? Right? So the more simple, the more direct your language, your imagery, the better your everything is.
Okay, so let's talk about in person. Can you give us mind reading 101? If we're in person, so I'm about to go to an event, and sometimes when you are chatting to somebody at an event and you can see their eyes darting around the room because clearly you aren't
Mm-hmm.
important enough to focus on.
Oh, absolutely.
And you feel
Yeah.
like saying, can you just go? Well, that's what I would do. But anyway,
Yeah. Yeah.
when you're in that kind of situation, what is a mind reading 101 tip that you can give us so we can practice?
Yeah. In person is a totally different dynamic, and it's one of my favorites because people always say scale, implement systems, but man, there's nothing that beats face-to-face communication and contact. I would agree with you. If somebody is looking over my shoulder for the bigger, better deal, I would just call them out on it. I know that's not the most PC thing to do, but I would. I'd just be like, I'm clearly boring you. Have a good time. Sorry to waste your time, without letting them kind of get away with that ladder climbing behavior, right? It's like, you don't understand how valuable I am, and you're clearly just using people.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not going to be a good client for me either. So I'm preemptively firing you. So here's how I do this. When I meet people, and at least here in America, one of the most common questions is, so what do you do for a living? It's it's so weird because that's the most boring question on the planet. One, because I know I've got the more interesting job, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm a mind reader. Oh my God, tell me more about that. All right, this is the same conversation I've had 5,000 times before. So I don't want to have the same conversation. But also, what they're really doing, they're not asking you what you do for a living. What they're really asking you is, how can I pigeonhole you as quickly as possible to know whether or not I can use you? And if you are a multi-entrepreneur, or you're a kind of a freelancer with multiple skill sets, well, now you're faced with the chance of, well, I've got a 1 in 5 shot of saying the right thing to this person who I know can hire me. But if I say I'm a graphic designer and they need email marketing, well, then I just shot myself in the foot, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
they're going to pigeonhole you by the one answer you give. Here's what I do for a living. So here's what you do instead. Instead of answering the question directly, here's what I do to make a living, I say, here's what I believe. I believe that the better you can understand why people do what they do, the better you can serve them, and the more effectively you can help people, the better the whole world is. So everything I do is a function of trying to understand the fundamental kind of motivational psychology that drives everybody. What do you think? Now, it sounds weird to give a weird kind of answer like that, but what you do is you're stating your fundamental life philosophy that motivates all of your relationships, personal and business. So if the person doesn't agree with your fundamental philosophy, then you know that they're not going to be a good client for you. So you've just disqualified them without them knowing it. But also, when they start a conversation with you to go in deeper, now everything that you do has that same throughput, right?
Mm-hmm.
This email marketing is an example of my passion for understanding psychology. My graphic design is leveraging fundamental motivational psychology. Now, all those separate things you do make sense because they're just different expressions of your core philosophy. So that's how you kind of circumnavigate that whole, what do you do for a living? I got to pick one of my five. Nope. Go straight for your fundamental philosophy, share that, and now you've saved yourself 6 months of hassle trying to figure out that they're a bad client.
I just actually did a video on, I think it was 5 conversation starters, and I talked about that icky person in the room who's just using you. And
Mm-hmm.
my call out for them is, who do you think the luckiest person in this room is? Because then you kind of have caught them out on the fact that they're looking around, and they have to kind of look at you and go, oh, you noticed. Let me
I
just
love
scan
that.
again, and I have to come back with an answer or I'll just walk off.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
So
So yeah, when
I think that's just a nice way to transition. You can either have a conversation with me or you can go find somebody better.
right, right, exactly. And I have the superpower of incredible focus. My I can just dial into one person. The world could be ending and I don't care. You are the only thing that exists in my world right now. And people really respond to that because they're so rarely seen, because so many people are flitting from here to there or interested in only insofar as you can help them, whatever it is. So people aren't used to full attention being brought to a conversation. So the more of that you can bring to your face-to-face conversations, man, you're going to get a lot of goodwill from people who really appreciate you not looking over their shoulder trying to look for the bigger deal.
Do you know the difference? And you say that, and it just brings me back to a conversation that I had with somebody. In fact, I don't even know their name, but it was when I went to a conference in Los Angeles, and we were both just gazing out. We weren't from Los Angeles, so we were gazing out across the city lights, and he was chatting about the city and the conference. We just were talking about general stuff, and then he started telling me about his wife and how he had this fantastic job and it paid a lot of money, but he really just wanted to be a farmer. And we got into this great big discussion about whether his wife had bought into the marriage with his current job or with him being a farmer and how that would affect their life going forward. It was the most amazing conversation. As I said, I don't even know this person's name, but I can remember everything about the conversation. And the difference between that and your regular networking conversation is it becomes memorable. All of a sudden you have like a physical point, a mental point that people can attach you to because you've had a conversation, not just an above the surface kind of generic interaction with somebody.
It's the conversational equivalent to a magic trick, because at these networking events, you all are operating off the same script. Hi, my name is Jonathan. I do this. What's your name? What do you do? Oh, my name, right? And that is so played out and it's safe, right? You're not going to stick your foot in your mouth by playing from the same script. But like I said, it's not memorable. You've had that conversation of 5,000 times too. So if you kind of hijack that script, and in the mentalism world, that's called a pattern interrupt. So if somebody is in a familiar pattern of behavior or thought, if you can just totally interrupt it, now they're fully in the present moment because their operating system doesn't know what to do. And if you can manage that dynamic expertly, it's a wonderful experience. So you guys just shortcut the whole chit chat and then got into real conversation. And a really good way of doing that is to do it yourself first. So in the context of a show, I always say my name first. Hey, my name's Jonathan. What's your name? So I offer what it is that I want to get from my spectator or volunteer. So if you demand from them first, good luck with that. But if you give it first, then they'll be happy to give it to you too, right? So if I said, hey, what's your name? Well, you're the mind reader. You tell me, right? Or if I go, hey, my name's Jonathan. What's your name? Oh, it's Carl, right? So if you want to cut through all the chit chat and really make a good human connection, be human, be genuine, be truthful about what it is that you're looking for in a way to facilitate real, genuine connection with that other person. Don't just dump all of your problems on them, right? They're not your therapist, but be open, warm, and kind, and people respond just the same.
Going right back to the beginning of this conversation, and you said you were helping out Randall with the criteria for getting the $1 million.
James Randi.
James Randi. You have to tell us, did somebody win the $1 million?
Nobody ever even got past preliminary testing.
Okay. So when you were watching these people, it was obviously clear that they were trying to scam somebody. What was the thing you kept picking up? What was the thing where you were watching and you were going, no? What was the cue? I expect that there was probably some sort of repetitive cue that you picked up on.
A lot of times they were just kind of doing mentalism tricks and magic tricks poorly disguised. But on kind of a meta analysis level, the challenge existed to hold professional charlatans' feet to the fire, right? People who were knowingly betraying people's trust and defrauding them and taking their money for spirit healing or whatever form that took, right? They know they're lying to people and they know they can't trick Randy, so they never even apply in the first place. So that's really why the challenge existed. But to be a real challenge, it needs to be open. So the only people who applied were people who really believed they had the mojo. And most of those folks, that's the defining characteristic that made them feel special and unique was I have this gift, but really all it is was self-delusion or being really good at reading physical cues. It wasn't that they had a straight connection to the spirit realm, right? We never saw evidence for that. So in double-blind testing, they would only do so well as statistics would tell them they should.
Right. And so was it those physical cues that you use in your mentalism tricks?
Yes, there's a lot that goes into it. It was kind of fun because I toured for a year and a half with a full-time entertainer to kind of learn the business of doing shows. And I would open for his show. He would do a bizarre magic show, and then I would do mind reading stuff. Well, I would open for his show, and I used about 5 volunteers. And he would be backstage. He wouldn't be watching, but he would be listening and go, well, your pacing was good here. It kind of lagged here. So it was a lot of good feedback. But then something weird started happening very quickly because this was at the beginning of my touring career. He started using the same 5 people for his shows. And it was really strange. I would bring 5 people up for my opening segment, my opening bit, and then he would use a significant number of those 5 volunteers for his show. He didn't see who it was that I brought up. We were just both looking for the same kind of people. And then you hone that feel over performance after performance after performance, you start to recognize what physiological behaviors are are common to this type of personality or disposition. So if you're going to do a rope escape, you want the guy who's kind of angry and combative and you're not going to get me. So that way the audience knows he's not in on it. They're like, "Oh, he's really tying the guy up. He's not going to let him loose on this." But if you get a meek person up there who's kind of bashful, well then you go, "Well, of course there's going to be a lot of slack in that rope." Right? So you need the right personality for the right situation. And you start to recognize that when you start looking for it. So we human beings are really good at reading those nonverbal cues because we're social creatures. But it's when you start to get conscious about how well your intuition is playing out that you start to train your intuition. So you've got to really be aware of the assumptions you're making, the actions you do because of those assumptions, and then paying attention to how well it plays out. So if it doesn't go well, being aware of the assumptions that caused that, rewiring that, and then making better assumptions based on that feedback. So it's all about assumptions, actions, feedback.
It's funny that you say that because I know that in my many, many years of having stores, sometimes when people walked in the door, you could just tell that they were going to buy stuff. Like you didn't even know what they were there for. But I don't know, there was just that intuition that this person is going to, stick a whole bunch of stuff on the counter and hand over their credit card.
Exactly, because their behaviors are a natural expression of their fundamental mindset and beliefs, right? So if they're coming with the mindset to buy, they're going to behave like somebody who buys, right? It's really subtle. It's really subtle. And you can really quickly spoil the sale when you start behaving like there's somebody that's going to buy. And then they get the feeling that you're trying to kind of game the system or show them the high ticket items just because. And then you kind of self-sabotage because you go, "Oh, this is going to be somebody that's going to buy." Right? And then you foul the deal because of those behaviors based on your belief about how they're behaving. So it's so weird how much of a mental game retail is and human relationships are. So even if somebody walks in ready to do something, you can still undermine your success by trying to behave too strongly to facilitate that outcome.
And from that point, does it just come back to just being human, just trying to make that connection that you said, probably 20 minutes ago, you were saying just make that connection, just be yourself?
Exactly. Care about people. Like, oh my God, what a revolutionary idea, right? It's like, I got to get my bottom line. I got to get my sales. I got to get treat your customers like people, and then they'll want to do business with you, right? Because there's that old argument. Well, is it better to be liked or trusted? Well, that's a false dichotomy. You
Because
can be liked and trusted.
yeah, exactly. I was going to say, if someone trusts you, there's a pretty good chance that they're going to like you.
Exactly. Exactly. But there's one example of somebody that I do not like, and I can always trust them to be untrustworthy. So I don't do business with that guy. I can trust him and I don't like him. But yeah, usually those two can go together. So the fastest way to undermine their trust and therefore your likability is to treat them solely as a cash cow, right? Because if you're doing good business, both people are better at the end of it. At the end of a transaction, both you and your customer are better off. That's the miracle of capitalism and free exchange of value. They value the product you're offering more than their dollars, and you value their dollars more than your product, and boom, more value on both sides of the equation. That's pure magic to me, and why I love entrepreneurs and retailers. It's just magnificent to me, and there's nothing else in the world that works like that does.
It's the whole grounds behind what I like to call ethical upselling and how it can have such a big difference in your business is if the thing that you want to offer somebody is going to help them, you aren't being a slimy salesperson because they're going to give you more money. If you genuinely think that plus this will make life better, will make it work faster, will get you more out of it, then it's not being, that sleazy electronics guy who tells you that you need the
Exactly.
next model up, but you don't know
And
why.
right. And that's why some of the most successful people I know are the kindest, most ethical people that I know. Because if you don't believe in your product or you know it's a scam, your nature is going to fight you trying to sell it to people because you know you're scamming them and you know you're an awful human being because you're doing it. So it's going to be uncomfortable to try to upsell people to this thing you know doesn't work. So that dynamic, it's built into your nature to undermine your ability to lie to people like that. So you can't get rich and fabulously wealthy for the most part in a really free market without the help of some legislatures to help you out there. But that's why the kindest, most ethical people who believe in their product are the most successful.
Because they're selling to genuinely help.
Exactly. And they are genuinely helping people, not just saying they are or thinking they are. They really genuinely are. So that's why I always say that entrepreneurs, we have an ethical obligation to share our value with the world and to get value for value. Because if you don't offer your value, you aren't helping the people you can help. And if you don't charge them appropriately, they're stealing from you. So you can't let them steal from you. And also, they have to value your services. That's a wisdom of the gypsies, I call it, because tarot card readers and crystal seers, all that kind of stuff, they could give you the world's best, most insightful reading, but if they did it for free, it's worth exactly what you paid
Yeah,
for it.
no value.
Nothing. Yeah, and they go, I don't think that applies to me. But if you pay a reader $20,000, man, you're going to be $20,000 worth invested in what they have to say, and it is now $20,000 worth valuable to you. So if you really have value to offer to the world, don't sell it for cheap because the clients won't value it either. So in order to really help your clients, they've got to bring the value to the table too, and they will be much more likely to engage with your product or your services or whatever it is that you do to make their life better.
Yeah, I see that as a coach all the time. I put out free stuff every single week, and someone will say, I watch all of your videos and I download all of your cheat sheets, but I'm just not able to implement it. But the minute that there's skin in the game and they've got someone to be accountable to, then, like you said, there's money on the table. Is I need to make this work. I can't afford to just be spending money and getting no results.
Exactly. That's why when people go, "Hey, can I pick your brain?" what they're really saying is, "Can I steal from you?" And then the further translation is, "Hey, can I waste an hour of your time and then totally ignore all the value you've given me during that hour?" So it's like three layers of waste when you let people just pick your brain. Now,
Oh,
I'm not just saying dollars are the only value you get in the world. Maybe you're mentoring somebody and you get emotional value out of it that way. I'm not saying dollars are the only way to enumerate value. But when people go, "Hey, let me pick your brain," it's exactly like people coming up to me after my mind reading show and then going, "How did you do that?" It's like, well, I spent my life learning how to
learning
do
that.
this.
Yep.
Yeah, it would be no different than somebody walking up to a millionaire and going, "Hey, how did you make $1 million? Teach me your system." It's like, no, I spent a lifetime learning how to do this, and my time isn't best spent working with somebody who doesn't understand the value of what I know. You think you want it, but you're not demonstrating it by your behavior, your attitude, your humbleness, your willingness to learn, your willingness to implement what it is I tell you, right? So there's an old kung fu saying that it's difficult to find a teacher, but it's more difficult to find a student.
Mm, this is true.
It's really, really, really hard to find people who genuinely want to improve their life or make things better and are willing to invest in their success. And on the flip side, you've got a lot of coaches who don't invest in their own education, who would never pay $99 for a course. Oh my God, it's so much money. Well, you're only going to attract students who want the $20 course, right? So the amount that you're willing to invest in yourself is the upper ceiling of how much your students are willing to invest in what you have to share.
Speaking of investing and speaking of sharing all of your secrets, you have a book, don't you, where people can learn some of your secrets?
I do. Yeah, I was having the same kind of 20 conversations with people on planes and after shows about, they would go, "Man, you're living the life. You're touring the world. You don't have a boss. You're getting paid good money. I can't even imagine doing that." And it was eventually it clicked. They literally couldn't imagine doing anything other than the 9 to 5 grind. So I started talking to people about how I think about things. And they started emailing me back going, "Oh my God, thank you so much for your time. Here's what I did, and here's how much better my life is because of it." And I realized, oh, it actually has a lot of good value. So I put it into a book so that way people can have those conversations with me without me having to actually physically be there.
And the book is called?
Think Like a Mind Reader.
And I saw last night, I was having a look at it because as I said, I am really fascinated with the whole behavioral psychology. And I saw that you can download the first chapter for free. And I was in bed at the time on my phone. I was like, no, we don't do this in bed. But I have it bookmarked to download today because I'm fascinated. I'm sure I'll end up buying the actual book. But,
Outstanding.
We always like to read the first chapter first. That's a very, very good hook to get people in because you're showing value straight away.
Exactly. Thank you. I am a genius. Oh, thank you. So the best way to do that is to just go to thinklikeamindreader.com, scroll down a little bit, and it'll have hey, read the first chapter here, and lots of links to Amazon where you could buy the physical book if you wanted. Here's a note. There isn't an ebook version of the book.
What?
Because the physical book has a mind reading trick built into it that you can use to read your friends' minds.
How did that not translate to digital?
Well, you'll have to buy the book to see. But you literally can't do that with an e-reader version of the book. But with the physical thing, you can. And experiencing that process is such a fundamental part of the experience of the book. I just couldn't in good conscience cut that out of the book and then offer it on digital. So if you want to read the whole thing and get the whole value out of the book, you got to get the physical thing.
Okay, so now there's a hook. There's a hook. If you want this thing so badly, you really do have to invest.
Exactly. You can't just download it from the internet.
Because I read on a Kindle, so I have to get myself a book.
Yeah. Sorry to clutter up the desk.
That's okay. And is that where people can find you if they want to learn more about your coaching, your speaking, your mentalism?
Yeah, the Think Like a Mind Reader is where you find the book and the accompanying video course that goes into some of the ideas more deeply with animations and video. Likeamindreader.com is my coaching and speaking side of things. So I teach people how to negotiate like a mind reader, sell like a mind reader, influence blank like a mind reader. So that's why it's likeamindreader.com. Thank
you so much for this. This has been, I think, one of my funnest episodes.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And I love sharing my thoughts with people and hopefully they find some value in it and can change their mind because, if you change your mind, you change your whole life.
Definitely. I 100% agree. Thank you so much for being on the show.
You are super welcome, and thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the Bringing Business to Retail podcast. You can find all of the show notes over at selenaknight.com. If you found something that you heard today particularly useful, I'd love it if you could leave me a review on iTunes or Stitcher. And of course, feel free to share this episode with someone that you think could benefit by listening to it. Want more retail biz strategies? you can watch the Bringing Business to Retail TV show, where each week I'll answer a question or provide you with a simple, actionable retail biz strategy that you can implement in your business right away. If you have a question or a guest, I'd love to hear from you. Drop my team an email at podcast@selenaknight.com, and I'll see you on the next episode. Have a great week.